और विदेशी दोस्त हों, विदेशी एजेंसियां हो या विदेशी जमी हो, देश पर प्रहार करने से कहीं बाज नहीं आते। ये अपने आप में दिखाता है कि वो भारत को बदनाम करने में कहीं पीछे नहीं रह रहे। भ्रम फैलाना, झूठ बोलना, देश के बारे में देखिए आज दुनिया क्या कहती है। यहाँ पे इटली की प्रधानमंत्री आई तो उन्होंने आके कहा मोदी जी की विश्वसनीयता, उनकी लोकप्रियता दुनिया भर में बढ़ रही है, उनकी मांग बढ़ रही है। मोदी जी मेजर लीडर के रूप में दुनिया ने स्वीकारा है।
We're crossing over to CNN News 18's Pallavi Ghosh, who's our senior editor. Pallavi, can you take us through the war of words that's erupting yet again over Rahul's comments made in the United Kingdom?
So as far as Rahul Gandhi goes, and the Congress party is but naturally defending him, saying that what's wrong in what he's saying, because he's essentially showing the mirror and some.
Good evening, this is Brass Tacks. I'm Zakka Jacob. Rahul Gandhi is at it once again. He has said that democracy in India is dying, all institutions have been captured by the RSS, and even compared the RSS to the Muslim Brotherhood. The BJP has hit back by saying that this shows the level of desperation to which Rahul Gandhi is stooping because his party has not been able to win elections since 2014. Therefore, he's leaning on Western powers to intervene. Is democracy dying in India as Mr. Gandhi has claimed? Are institutions being captured by people with a particular ideology? Or is Rahul Gandhi missing the tree for the woods?
The idea is to use the democratic contest to come to power and then subvert the democratic contest afterwards.
Congress MP Rahul Gandhi rounded off his week-long London visit with yet another scathing attack on the Modi government. He alleged that democracy was under attack in India.
The way the BJP responds, right? It's not interested in a conversation. They've decided that they know what's going on. Nobody else in the country understands what's going on. And that's it.
He claimed that the BJP believes it will be in power forever.
Before the BJP was in power for 10 years, we were in power for 10 years, right? And so it's not, I mean, the BJP likes to believe that they've come to power in India and they're going to be in power eternally. You know, that's not the case, right?
He even targeted the RSS, equating it to the Muslim Brotherhood.
One organization called the RSS, fundamentalist fascist organization, has basically captured pretty much all of India's institutions. RSS is you can call it a secret society. It's built along the lines of the Muslim Brotherhood.
The BJP accused Rahul Gandhi of shaming the country on foreign soil by seeking foreign intervention.
BJP would like to very emphatically state with great agony that Mr. Rahul Gandhi has sought to shame India's democracy, India's polity, India's parliament, India's judicial system, and India's strategic security from a foreign land.
Law Minister Kiran Rijiju said there is a bid to attack democracy in the name of freedom of expression.
सरकार को गाली देते रहते हैं, मोदी जी को गाली देते रहते हैं, और जो सबसे ज्यादा बोलते हैं वही बोलते हैं कि बोलने नहीं दिया जा रहा है.
So who is undermining democracy here?
So Rahul Gandhi has spent about a week or so in London, and wherever he has gone in London, there's been a diatribe on the state of Indian democracy. When he addressed students at the Cambridge University, for example, he said that democracy is under attack in India and claimed that Israeli spyware Pegasus was on his phone and the phone of other opposition leaders. While addressing the Indian diaspora, Rahul Gandhi said that defenders of democracy like the US and Europe have failed to take notice that a chunk of democracy has come undone in India. When he met members of parliament in the UK yesterday, he said that India's democratic institutions are under attack and have been captured by the RSS and the BJP. And while addressing a lecture at the Chatham House, Rahul Gandhi said that while the BJP thinks it will be in power eternally, there is strong resistance building against the ruling dispensation. Now, while Rahul Gandhi has been making multiple statements against the Modi government, against the fact that democracy is dying in the country as he sees it, the BJP has attempted to fact-check him with some numbers. Kanchan Gupta, who's senior advisor in the INB ministry, has said that Rahul Gandhi's average attendance in parliament in this Lok Sabha is 52%. That is lower than the national average of 78% for all other MPs. He pointed out that there have been entire sessions of Parliament when Rahul Gandhi's attendance was zero, like the winter session last year. As per Kanchan Gupta, Rahul Gandhi has participated in only 6 debates in Parliament in this current Lok Sabha, whereas the average for MPs is 68. Rahul Gandhi has not introduced a single private member's bill and has asked 92 questions between 2019 and 2023 in this Lok Sabha, whereas on average an MP asks about 160 questions. So let me go across to our guest, Sanju Verma, BJP National Spokesperson, joining us, Dr. Anshul Avijit, Congress Spokesperson, Ghanshyam Tiwari, Spokesperson of the Samajwadi Party, Sanjeev Srivastava, Senior Journalist, also joining us. Let me start with Dr. Anshul Avijit. Mr. Gandhi says that democratic institutions, democracy itself, is under attack here in India. Mr. Gandhi recently undertook a 3,000-kilometer journey from Kanyakumari to Kashmir. Every day he was having speeches or press conferences or interviews where he was attacking the government and the party in power ad nauseum. No one stopped him. No one, arrested him. No one put him in jail for it. No cases were filed against him for what he said against the government. He was free to make whatever comments he chose to make. How then is democracy being killed in India?
Well, the fundamental charge is that he's gone outside the country into foreign soil and then betraying this country. If you find his comments so transgressive, Zakka, or anybody else, members of the BJP, I would like to remind them of the comments made by the Prime Minister while on foreign soil. Now, he was globetrotting before the pandemic, as we all know. The Prime Minister is infallible, of course. Whatever he says is the gospel. He's done nothing wrong except wreck this country. We all know that, so no complaints there. But let me remind you of some of the comments he's made. For example, he's gone to Canada and said कि हमारे पहले यहाँ पर गंदगी थी, हम साफ करा रहे हैं. This was a direct attack on India's democracy, on its people. Forget about deriding the Congress party and the opposition that came before it. I mean, even derided his own, the BJP government that came before. In Seoul, he said that, the people of India earlier used to think that they must have committed some sin in their earlier rebirth. So because they're born in India. So he was the transformative figure that brought out the shining India from now. Earlier, India lived in the dark ages. I mean, he set the tone for it.
Okay.
He's been critiquing India's democracy.
There are two aspects here, Anshul. One is, what he said, and two, where he said. I will ask Sanju Verma about that. But I want you to clarify on this. When he says democracy is under attack and institutions have been captured, like I said, for a good 3.5-4 months, every day he was attacking the government while here in India, and no one said a thing or did anything to him.
There is absolutely no doubt that Indian democracy is under siege. I mean, you can see it all around. Civil liberties are being curbed. The ED is knocking on doors of anyone who criticizes this government.
Okay.
Yes, we may have had a 6-month yatra, but look around you. The freedom of the press is being curbed. It's turning into an Orwellian state. There is a far overreach of the executive. They are assuming all powers. It's all there in front of you.
Okay, so Sanju Verma, please respond. The argument from the opposition, from Dr. Avijit and others, is that you are muzzling the opposition with ED, CBI, IT, etc. Look at every opposition party, whether it is Sisodia of the Aam Aadmi Party, Sanjay Raut of Shiv Sena, Abhishek Banerjee of TMC, all of them have some case or the other by CBI or ED. Congress Party, of course, there are numerous leaders against whom there are cases by CBI and ED. You are basically using these institutions to muzzle the voice of the opposition.
Zakka, I will answer that question, but I cannot allow some of the defamatory statements made by the Congress spokesperson. I cannot allow him to go scot-free, and I will just pointedly rebut him. There's a difference between criticizing systems or operating procedures in your country or saying that XY scheme is not functioning to its fullest optimal point. And there is a difference between DISSENT dissent and DESCENT dissent. Rahul Gandhi, when he goes on foreign soil, he does not engage in DISSENT. He engages in DESCENT. It is a race to the bottom where he, driven by visceral hatred for Prime Minister Modi, stops at nothing, but even insinuates a balkanization of this country by asking foreign powers like the United States of America and European Union to please come here and try and restore democracy. Have you seen Narendra Modi ever doing that? This is the same Rahul Gandhi who actually undermined our brave hearts and their supreme sacrifice by calling the horrific Pulwama terror attack as just another ordinary car bomb blast. You know, you can have political, ideological differences, but when you make a mockery of the supreme valor of our armed forces, then you are unfit to be called a leader. And you, Rahul Gandhi, are hallucinating to be the Prime Minister in 2024. Excuse me, you will not even become the Prime Minister in 2029.
Can you materially qualify, the problem the BJP has is where he said it or what he said? Because what he has been saying, he's been saying for a number of years now. There's nothing new in what he has said.
Very good question, Zakka. What he has been saying is nothing new, and that itself partly answers your question that Rahul Gandhi, I was just about to say, Rahul Gandhi is a repeat, a habitual offender. And I've said this in the past on your debates, that sometimes you ignore the ignominious statements by opposition leaders saying that perhaps it was a slip of the tongue, perhaps it was oversight. But in the case of a rabid, habitual offender, it cannot be dismissed as oversight. And I will tell you why I have a problem and why the BJP has a problem, Zakka.
Okay.
We all know Rahul Gandhi is a voracious, person when it comes to using social media, particularly Twitter. He has an opinion on everything under the sun. Show me one tweet by Rahul Gandhi where he applauded India. I'm not asking him to applaud Narendra Modi. Where he applauded India when we overtook the United Kingdom to become the world's 5th largest economy in terms of nominal GDP.
Okay.
Did he applaud India when the Jan Dhan Yojana became the world's largest financial inclusion scheme with more than 48 crore bank accounts opened in the last 8 odd years alone? Did he applaud the Indian government when we became the world's largest health insurance scheme after launching Ayushman Bharat, even bigger than Obamacare? Has he ever spoken about the 11 crore plus?
No, Sanju Verma, what you're outlining, at least some of it are government schemes, and Rahul Gandhi as an opposition leader, why should he praise the government? I mean, it's his raison d'etre is to criticize the government. But be that as it may. Let me ask Ghanshyam Tiwari, because something interesting is happening here, Ghanshyam Tiwari. None of these parties, and I'm taking them out by name, Samajwadi Party, your party, Aam Aadmi Party, TMC, none of them have come forth and endorsed or subscribed to what Mr. Gandhi has said about democracy being under attack. The only opposition leader of some consequence who has said that is Sharad Pawar of the NCP. A, do you not agree with Mr. Gandhi's views that democracy is under attack? And B, I think the larger, more consequential question is, how can democracy be under attack when 3 major opposition parties have not endorsed or subscribed to what Mr. Gandhi is saying? It can't be just that the Congress party is being muzzled. If democracy is under attack, all opposition parties should be muzzled.
Well, good evening, Zakka, to you, the viewers, and fellow co-panelists. Also, a very happy Holi to every one of your viewers, that we as a nation remain prosperous and live in harmony is a message that I would want to share. As far as the debate today, I think whether democracy is under attack, you can look at it from the Prime Minister's speech in both the houses, where for around 3 hours he spoke and he did not utter the word China or Adani, where the opposition bench were asking him questions pointedly about Adani, and some remarks were expunged, remarks something as basic as, has Adani Group contributed to BJP in the last 20 years? It's a very simple question. BJP has not been able to answer this for 20 years, not in 20 days, when Adani Group lost its lakhs of crores, and BJP lost its credibility, and the Prime Minister lost his voice. Second, is democracy under attack? Look at the number of journalists getting arrested in India. Look at the case of Siddiqui Kappan. Look at what the Supreme Court said with respect to the Chief Election Commissioner and Election Commissioner. Look at how India reacted to various media channels, including the BBC. Look at how they have used every signal to, BJP has used every signal to defend themselves rather than the institution under attack. Look at the statistics that 95% of raids happen on opposition leaders. Look at the number of MLAs and MPs who end up joining BJP.
Can I ask one interjection? When you say institutions are being captured, and you cited the example of the Supreme Court coming up with this verdict last week about how the Chief Election Commissioner has to be appointed by a panel. When that verdict came, opposition leaders welcomed that verdict. But you criticize the same Supreme Court when it comes out with, abolishing triple talaq. It can't be. And I'm asking a very simple question. Are you suggesting, is Mr. Gandhi suggesting that when he says institutions have been captured, that this current Supreme Court under this current Chief Justice is also captured by the BJP and the RSS?
No, I'm just saying that read the statement made by the Supreme Court in this verdict and look at the reaction by BJP.
I want to
Just
answer.
as simple as that. When the Supreme Court is saying that we want institutions to live, prosper, so that democracy lives, so that India can continue as a democracy and no one is able to bulldoze. Look at the word bulldoze. Bulldoze is hallmark of its bulldozer Janata Party today. That they are going to
Zakka,
bulldoze
may I quickly
everyone
rebut, please?
so that their ego is satisfied, that their henchmen and their corporate crony capitalists are saved, and the institutions have to pay for it.
Okay, so Sanjeev Verma, quick response, and then I'll go to Sanjeev Srivastava, who's been waiting very patiently.
When BJP has no place to hide.
Okay, Zakka, I heard him.
It is questioned on democracy.
This can't be a monologue
has
by
neither
Okay,
a
Ghanshyam, we've heard you.
vision.
Ghanshyam, we've heard you. Let
Please
Sanjeev
hold
Verma,
your
quick
horses,
rebuttal,
Ghanshyam.
please, quick, and then Sanjeev Srivastava. Yeah.
A very quick rebuttal, Ghanshyam, is this. To Ghanshyam Zakka is this. Ghanshyam is sitting here and waxing eloquent about how Prime Minister Modi has crushed democracy in this country. And this is the same party, till now, their leader Akhilesh Yadav has not condemned the fact that Atiq Ahmed, the prime conspirator in the murder of Umesh Pal, why is it that Akhilesh Yadav has chosen to be silent? Atiq Ahmed contested on a Samajwadi Party ticket from Phulpur and was a Samajwadi Party MP between 2004 and 2009. You encouraged Mafia Raj and Jungle Raj in Uttar Pradesh. You were wiped out a couple of months back and got just 111 seats when you said that no matter what, Yogi Adityanath will not get a second term. You should be ashamed and introspect. Why is it that the opposition is losing every electoral battle, big or small?
No. One second. Sanjeev has been waiting. So with your permission, both of your permissions, let me go to Sanjeev, please. Sanjeev, the problem with the whole democracy is under attack argument is just recently, just a few days ago, we had results for the 3 states that went to polls in the Northeast, right? Now, there was 80% plus voter turnout in those 3 states. So a large majority of the electorate turned up. And as the Prime Minister outlined in his victory speech last week, Meghalaya and Nagaland are majority Christian states. Today, the BJP is in power through its allies, both in Meghalaya and in Nagaland. If democracy was indeed dead, as Mr. Gandhi is alleging, how come 80% of the population electorate in these states have come out and voted? Now, it's one thing to say that they've not voted in favor of Mr. Gandhi's party, but that does not mean democracy is dead.
Exactly.
Sanjeev.
Tripura, Meghalaya, Congress got more seats than BJP. BJP ended up getting, I think, a couple of seats. Congress got 4 or 5. But that's neither here nor there, really. So the broad thing is, yes, in terms of elections, that we have a thriving democratic system for elections, and the election outcome, whatever anybody may say, I still think is free and fair in the sense that people are allowed to go exercise their franchise with as much freedom as they had before. And the outcome is also the votes. I am not one of those EVM naysayers that EVM is faulty or anything. So elections are free and fair. But where we have changed during the last decade or so, or since 2014, is that in the run-up to elections, everything is so stacked in favor of the governing party, which usually has been the case since independence. But like I always say, that all systems which are wrong in India, their roots have been laid by the Congress party or since independence, whether it's corruption, malpractices, subjugation of institutions. But this government has taken it to a completely different zone. So yes, the ED was always used selectively more against the opposition, but now it is 95% against the opposition. So CBI was always the case parrot, but now CBI only targets a certain political class.
Okay.
Similarly, Election Commission, except for the brief period of TN session, and it has been a little here and there. Now it is more here and there than ever before. So it is the degree of how things have changed.
But Sanjeev, can I ask one question? You have said all of these things, and I admittedly, not everything is being done right by this government, or it's not like there are no problems. But the one thing you've not said is, what is the opposition doing to convince the Indian voter that they are a better alternative? I'm not seeing any stories, any storylines, certainly not from the Congress party. You can argue, individual leaders. Mamata Banerjee has a story to sell in Bengal, therefore she's got 3 terms there. You could argue Pinarayi Vijayan has a story to sell in Kerala, therefore he's got a 2nd term with a bigger majority. There may be individual opposition leaders, state level, who are able to convince the voter that they are a better alternative than the BJP. Nationally and in a majority of the states, including in the Northeast, where up until 6-7 years ago the BJP did not even have a footprint, what is the opposition doing to convince the Indian voter that they are offering the better alternative?
So I started by saying that, Zakka, I only half said it, that the BJP deserves its victories in elections, and I think they are free and fair. But then I said the run-up to those elections is where things have changed a lot. And yes, I completely agree with you. The opposition is a house divided. The Congress has really no plan in place. It has no organization in place. They are not thinking right. So I can speak for the next half an hour criticizing the Congress and how it lacks the will, the planning, the organization, the wisdom, or the political heft, or the single-minded determination to go and fight an election properly. But the debate is about something else. The debate is about whether what Rahul Gandhi said in UK is right or wrong. One thing where I disagree with Rahul Gandhi, because he said exactly these institutions have been captured and this and that, at least during half a dozen of his press conferences during the Bharat Jodo Yatra, including the one odd which I attended, so where I was also there. So he said that. But what I don't agree with Rahul Gandhi, see one thing, and one more thing, Zakka, which I'd like to say, the other very major institution which has changed a lot. See how many debates we now have criticizing the government. Most of the debates are focused on questioning the opposition. And that's another trend which has been there since 2014. So when
Sanjeev, you're a veteran in this profession. You have far more years than I. Again, I'm not for one suggesting that there are no problems with the Indian media. Of course, there are problems aplenty. But the very fact that all of us are here at 9 p.m. on India's leading channel and debating this issue, and it's not like anyone is calling from Sanju's party or the government and saying, aap log ye kyun kar rahe and all that. We're talking. I mean, we have a Congress representative, we have a Samajwadi Party representative, we have a BJP representative, we have a veteran journalist, and none of you are being stopped or heckled or it's not like you can't put your views forth on primetime television. So, in as much as that, there is. I mean, you're free to say what you want to say, your opinion. Not necessarily everybody agrees with it, but nobody is stopping you from expressing that. So I want to go to Anshul on this. Anshul, I think the critical aspect of what Mr. Gandhi said, which has been to the chagrin of a lot of folks, not just the BJP, is when he said that the beacons of democracy, the United States, Europe, they're all looking at what is happening in India and they're not saying anything. They're not doing anything. By implication, he's saying he wants them to do something or he wants them to say something. Now, I have 2 problems with that. Number one, in that assertion, you are somehow giving this exalted status to the US and Europe. Somehow they are better democracies than us. They can go around the world and lecture everybody how to perfect your imperfect democracies. That's number one. I don't think that's correct in and of itself. I think America is a very flawed democracy. Secondly, if the people of India do not want Mr. Modi's government or think that Mr. Modi's government is not delivering and want a change, the people of India are very well capable of changing Mr. Modi. They voted Mrs. Gandhi out. So I don't see any reason why, if a majority of people feel that this government is not working for them, they will vote this government out. Why do you need to lean on some third party to do that for you, or at least help you in that process?
Excellent question, Zakka. The first one, Mr. Rahul Gandhi said that Indian democracy is some sort of a public good. It doesn't belong to India alone. It's not parochial, it's not ghettoized, it's not regional. When we got independence, other countries who descended into totalitarianism and dictatorship and military rule and all, people out there marveled, with India's contradictions, how could you sustain a democracy for so long? It's inspirational for the rest of the world. So when Indian democracy is under threat, it's not about being better democracies. Nobody is saying that. Mr. Gandhi never suggested that any democracy was better. We had a sustainable liberal democracy, right? Which was the envy of the world. Many countries who didn't have it. And when that is under threat, then it becomes the problem of the world. The Prime Minister himself went to Denmark and said, look, India's accomplishments are that of the world because one out of every fifth Indian, world citizen, one is an Indian. So, India's accomplishments, whether you invented zero by Aryabhat, it doesn't become like, oh, zero belongs to India alone. It becomes that of the world.
No,
so
I don't necessarily agree with that. Look,
the second point.
Once again, like I said, Sanju Verma, give me 10 seconds, please. India's democracy belongs to Indians first, right? With all its what's and all. If there are problems in Indian democracy, it's up to Indian people to fix it. But to say that, it's the world's problem, I'm not sure that is true. And neither am I, convinced about America need to weigh in or Europe need to weigh in.
No, nobody's saying anything. Look, let me just conclude, Zakka.
I
am saying that...
I'm coming to you, Sanjuji. I'm coming to you.
Zakka,
I'm coming to you. Give him 30 seconds. Yeah, he wants to
other
conclude.
countries to come and reorganize our polity. He's just saying that these self-righteous countries, which call themselves the flag bearers of democracy, why are they mum at a time like this when Indian institutions are under siege?
Okay, Sanju Verma.
That is second point.
Yes. Yeah, Sanju Verma.
No, Zakka, he's made many points. Now I need to respond. This can't be a monologue.
No, hang on. I haven't finished your
Anshul, you've made substantive points. Let her respond, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Zakka. I want to just tell the Congress spokesperson and through your show, the Congresses, that democracy khatre mein kab thi? Democracy was in danger when in 1951 Nehru passed the First Amendment, when Indira Gandhi imposed emergency in 1975, when Indira Gandhi imposed the 42nd Amendment upon us, she thrust it upon us and curbed the power of judicial review of courts, when Rajiv Gandhi surreptitiously tried to pass the Anti-Defamation Bill in 1988, democracy tab khatre mein thi. Democracy khatre mein thi in 2013 when a Hindu-phobic Congress tried to bring in the communal violence bill. Thank God it never saw the light of the day. Democracy khatre mein tab thi when shamefully and shamelessly Jairam Ramesh and Ajay Maken went and sat in dharna at Jantar Mantar in support of Teesta Setalwad, despite the historic verdict by Supreme Court giving an unconditional clean chit to Prime Minister Modi, who was hounded by successive Congress dispensations in the Gujarat riots case for 20 long years. Prime Minister Modi did not ramble on television debates. He faced the law of the land for 20 years. And what do Congresses do? When Rahul Gandhi is called by the Enforcement Directorate, Congresses try and do a dharna in front of the CBI and the ED officers as if koi mazak chal raha hai. And you tell me, is Rahul Gandhi out on bail or not in the National Herald scam? Yes. Is Sonia Gandhi out on bail? Yes. Is P. Chidambaram out on bail in the INX media scam? Yes. Has the Supreme Court quashed cases against Rahul Gandhi? No. Has the Supreme Court quashed case against Sonia Gandhi? No. Has Supreme Court quashed the case against P. Chidambaram?
But Sanjuji, can I make a 10-second intervention? 1 second. 95% of all these corruption cases. One second, one at a time. If all of us are going to talk at the same time, viewers will not be able to hear any of us.
Sure.
95% of the cases, Sanjuji, that are filed by CBI or ED or IT department happen to be against the opposition. Today we had a very piquant situation where a BJP MLA in Karnataka, Mr. Virupakshappa, again charged with corruption. His son was caught taking bribes. There were some crores recovered from his office, his son's office. He was absconding for the last 3 days, managed to get interim bail today, went back to his village. And you should see the scenes of celebration and victory there. It's almost like we are celebrating corruption. So if that is the scene on the one hand, and then as opposition is alleging all cases are against opposition leaders, then it can't be that corruption ek tarafa hai na.
नहीं, आपने सही बात कही Zakka ji. I will now not be very verbose. I will just tell you one thing. This Karnataka minister and his son, Virupakshappa, his name is quite a tongue twister. I'm not going to sit here and say that, oh my God, if he's out on bail, he's innocent. No. Until you are under trial, you are guilty and you're not innocent. But also remember the case of K. Ishwarappa, the Panchayati Raj minister. People said that, Santosh Patil, the contractor, in his suicide note, named K. Ishwarappa. He was removed as the Panchayati Raj minister. And later it was found that Santosh Patil's charges were baseless. Has Congress got the guts to remove D.K. Shivakumar, who's also out on bail in a 700 crore Benami disproportionate income case?
Okay.
D.K. Shivakumar is the Karnataka Congress chief.
Okay.
Do you have the guts to sack him?
Anyway, this debate, I think, is slightly diverted away to corruption. That's not the topic of the evening. Let me go back to Ghanshyam and bring the conversation back to what Mr. Gandhi said about democracy being under attack. All of us on this panel, irrespective of political affiliations or leanings or whatever it is, Ghanshyam, will agree that the closest India went to being a non-democratic setup was in 1975 under the emergency, right? After which we've had elections. I mean, before that also we've had elections, but after which we've had elections where, all parties have come to power. Today the BJP is in power. Yesterday the UPA was in power. Before that you had the United Front and the National Front. So multiple parties have ruled India at different points of time. Is the crux of the problem, is the nub of the problem for the opposition, and this is exemplified best by the Congress, but I guess, your party and other parties are also facing this similar problem, that you are not able to find a narrative that is compelling enough for the voters of India to vote out the BJP, nor are you able to present an alternative vision which is compelling enough for them to vote you in and vote out the BJP. Basically, electorally, you simply don't seem to have an answer to the BJP, whether it's Congress, SP or any other opposition party.
Well, two things, right? As an example. For example, you can say that opposition in India, say Samajwadi Party, does not have a compelling narrative. And BJP, Adityanath, has a compelling narrative. What was the compelling narrative? 80-20, a hate speech. An election commission could not intervene. The hate speech was made in Doordarshan platform, on a Doordarshan platform, which is funded by taxpayers of India. So, yes, you can create compelling narratives on hatred. You can create compelling narratives on non-constitutional terms, and you can turn the country into a spectacle, which BJP has turned with everyday Hindu-Muslim debates. Talking about the second part of it, which is propaganda. Now, right on this debate, Sanju Verma said that Akhilesh Yadav ji is silent on what is happening in Prayagraj. An hour back, he tweeted, Allahabad हत्याकांड में मृतक भाजपा का सदस्य था और पैसे के मामले में जिसका नाम आ रहा है वो भी भाजपा के ही मंत्री हैं. आखिर एनकाउंटर करके सरकार कौन सा राज छुपा रही है? भाजपाई कब मिट्टी में मिलाए जाएंगे? ऐसे भाजपाई कब मिट्टी में मिलाए जाएंगे या मंत्री पद से हटाए जाएंगे? If Sanju Verma ji is true to her word, then this case should have. Please, I don't.
Ma'am, one at a time, ma'am, please. Let's have that decorum. I'll give you a chance to rebut. Let Ghanshyam finish his point. Thank you. Yes, Ghanshyam.
With images, with charges made by Atiq Ahmed's sister. With a question raised by the leader of opposition in Uttar Pradesh Assembly, which is Akhilesh Yadav ji, former chief minister. Now it is clear that this encounter is a propaganda which is being played out, which possibly and allegedly is trying is.
But Ghanshyam, just very quickly, are you saying Atiq Ahmed has no role in this thing that happened, this incident that happened in Prayagraj? I mean, his son was seen in the footage.
Yes, but the point is that is staged by the minister. Will the minister be interrogated? Should he resign?
Staged
by the minister is not saint.
Sanju Verma, quick response, and then I'll give the final word to Sanjeev Srivastava, please.
2017,
Sanju Verma.
Sanju Verma ji would remember statistics.
Yeah. You've made a point, Ghanshyam. Now yield and let her respond.
Ghanshyam blabbering. Thank you.
Sanju Verma,
You know, Zakka. Ghanshyam can sit here and talk about Hindu-Muslim hate narrative that the BJP is peddling. But let me remind Ghanshyam that who did they field from Kairana? They fielded a man convicted, not accused. Nahid Hassan has been convicted of a Hindu genocide in Kairana and is currently behind bars. And Samajwadi Party and its shameless leaders are still standing in solidarity with Nahid Hassan, and Ghanshyam Tiwari has the audacity to lecture BJP on secularism. Is Atiq Ahmed the prime conspirator in the Umesh Pal murder case a Samajwadi Party MP? Yes or no? The answer is yes. Before you lecture the BJP, look at your own backyard. You need to do a lot of introspection. That's the reason you were voted out and you are still not coming back to power for another 15 years.
I want to go to Sanjeev. Sanjeev, and I'll get closing comments. Sanjeev, again, I keep coming back to this. In a democracy, whether you like it or not, winning elections is a very, very critical part. If you want to survive as a political party, if you want to thrive as a political party, you have to win elections. Now, it's not like, BJP has been, of course, they've been steamrolling a lot of elections, including the latest ones that happened in the Northeast. but there have been individual leaders in some cases who've been able to put up a front against them. Let's take the Congress itself. I mean, the Chhattisgarh Chief Minister, Mr. Baghel, came to power with a 2/3 majority, right? When Mr. Gehlot came to power in 2018, it was riding on the back of anger against the then Vasundhara Raje government. Of course, it's a different matter that he squandered that. The point is that there have been instances, again in Maharashtra, when these three parties came together. You could argue that you were, stealing the democratic mandate or whatever, but the fact is they came together. It was a formidable alliance. Now, point is, you need to have a strategy, a plan, a narrative to take on the BJP. Unfortunately for the opposition, none of this seems to be in place, or at least not in a way that it's compelling enough for the Indian voter.
So how can I even begin to disagree with you? That's a no-brainer. That the opposition needs to get its act together. They need to get a narrative or get a system in place by which
they can effectively combat BJP on the ground and perhaps defeat them in elections. My limited point all through has been one, that while I am convinced that the elections continue to be free and fair, the process of voting and counting is free and fair, but in the run-up to election, the field is not evenly matched because everything has changed. So the opposition's task becomes that much more difficult, 5x more difficult.
How is the playing field not level?
They have to ensure resources.
Explain that to me.
Yeah.
How is the playing field not level?
I can tell you if you want. Yes, because the playing field is not level because of the use or abuse of agencies, that you just have to join the BJP and you'll be fine. If you are not with them, you'll be targeted. Similar case, there is, and I don't want to now go specific in these institutions, ki election commission ka ye, uska ye, and the resources mobilization. The party, except, a TMC or a particular state machinery, which is a regional party, they may get still some resources. But in terms of resources, we are now, and we all know that resources do play a major role in elections. And of course, there is no face like Narendra Modi's face. So all of those together, I think, and the media's role, with due respects to you and everybody else, and I am still a media person, I think. But so everything has changed in 2014 to a large extent, and we should not even be coy about it. It's fine.
I'll give a cricketing analogy, which I guess all of us can agree.
Zakka, I just wanted to say one thing more. One thing more on Rahul Gandhi. I also agree with you that there is no point in bemoaning the death or near death or suspension or collapse of Indian democracy on foreign soil. It doesn't look good. And there is no point, because I completely disagree with this comparison of RSS with Muslim Brotherhood. I think that's the problem with Congress party also. They just go too overboard in their comparisons.
I'll wrap up.
That's a lesson for them to learn.
I'm completely out of time with the cricketing analogy, which I think all of us can agree on. When an MS Dhoni's team was winning every trophy in the cabinet, we had the best team, we had the best players, but the world couldn't turn around. Other teams couldn't turn around and say, oh, they're not playing cricket. Of course they were playing cricket. They were playing better cricket. It's a bit like that in electoral terms as well. The opposition, like I said, needs to come up with a niti, a niyat, and a chehra, most importantly, to be able to convince the Indian voter that they have a better alternative than Mr. Modi and the BJP. We'll see if that happens in 2024. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back on the other side, it's an exclusive conversation with former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott. He's speaking on a range of issues, from the Quad to the G20 meeting that just concluded, to how to tackle the Russia-Ukraine war currently, the path to peace, and the most important one, the elephant in the room, China. All that and more right on the other side.
देश पर प्रहार करने से कहीं बाज नहीं आते। ये अपने आप में दिखाता है कि वो भारत को बदनाम करने में कहीं पीछे नहीं रह रहे। भ्रम फैलाना, झूठ बोलना, देश के बारे में देखिए आज दुनिया क्या कहती है। यहाँ पे इटली की प्रधानमंत्री आई तो उन्होंने आके कहा मोदी जी की विश्वसनीयता, उनकी लोकप्रियता दुनिया भर में बढ़ रही है, उनकी मांग बढ़ रही है। मोदी जी मेजर लीडर के रूप में दुनिया ने स्वीकारा है।
We're crossing over to Sena News 18's Pallavi Ghosh, who's our senior editor. Pallavi, can you take us through the war of words that's erupting yet again over Rahul's comments made in the United Kingdom?
So as far as Rahul Gandhi goes, and the Congress party is but naturally defending him, saying that what's wrong in what he's saying, because he's essentially showing the mirror and something which the world is very much aware of. So to sum up, in the last 3 to 4 lectures that he's already given, whether it's a university press conference addressing the Indian diaspora or even the British Parliament, he certainly has said that the institutions in our country are crumbling, democracy has been compromised, and anyone who raises a point or asks a question of the government is targeted. Either their mics are switched off, they're not allowed to speak inside Parliament, or there are cases which are applied against them. He gave he gave an instance of himself also, that there were multiple criminally liable cases which shouldn't have been filed, but they were filed against him. I think the BJP's reaction is on expected lines, and this is certainly something which they're going to build up till 2024. That Rahul Gandhi and the Congress represent that section of the political spectrum who always make a voice against the country. It's not just about the BJP that they're attacking, but they started questioning the mandate of the people who've given an overwhelming mandate to the BJP. And if you ask me, politically speaking, what is going to be the fallout? Well, I think this war of words is just going to escalate. Clearly, the Congress under Rahul Gandhi has made it very clear that in 2024, the electoral calling card would be that you have to have a free and fair democracy. And that's only possible if the BJP is ousted.
Absolutely. Pallavi, thank you so much for joining us and for giving us that crucial context in this story. Rahul Gandhi has once again targeted the central government on foreign soil. While addressing an in-conversation session at the Chatham House think tank in London, Rahul Gandhi has made a huge claim that the Bharatiya Janata Party likes to believe it will be in power in India eternally, and to say that the Congress is gone is a ridiculous idea. Rahul even attacked the central government for capturing all of the institutions. He said that the RSS is a fundamental fascist organization which has captured all of the institutions. Meanwhile, Union Minister Kiran Rijiju has hit back at Rahul Gandhi, reminding him about the 1975 emergency that was imposed by then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. Rijiju said in India, democracy can't be overthrown. There was an attempt, however, in 1975 when an emergency was in force, but the constitution at that point had prevailed.
If you look at the time from independence to now, the Congress party has been in power for majority of the time, right? So it's not that the BJP has been in power. Before the BJP was in power for 10 years, we were in power for 10 years, right? And so it's not, I mean, the BJP likes to believe that they've come to power in India and they're going to be in power eternally. That's not the case, right? One organization called the RSS, fundamentalist fascist organization, has basically captured pretty much all of India's institutions. RSS is you can call it a secret society. It's built along the lines of the Muslim Brotherhood. And the idea is to use the democratic contest to come to power and then subvert the democratic contest afterwards. The way
It's been a busy month for Indian diplomacy. We had the G20 ministers meeting last week. The Italian Prime Minister was in town. This week, the Australian Prime Minister is going to be in New Delhi as well as in Ahmedabad as India seeks to make a stellar contribution in the year of its G20 presidency. But of course, there are global headwinds. There is the Russia-Ukraine war, which has divided the nations, with the United States and its European partners on the one side, firmly entrenched in their position on Ukraine, and then you have Russia and China in the other corner. Can India walk this diplomatic tightrope? Joining me now is a very, very special guest. Tony Abbott is the former Prime Minister of Australia, currently on a tour here in India. Thank you very much, Prime Minister Abbott, for speaking with us here on CNN News 18. I want to first start off by asking you about the free trade agreement between India and Australia. You had played an important role in the run-up to the signing that happened last year. How do you see the ECTA working so far? What more, in your view, can be done to expand trade between India and Australia? In fact, before the ECTA came into effect, trade was just a bit over $23 billion, which many would say is underwhelming. How do you see that increasing going forward?
I wouldn't want to minimise what's already been agreed. The deal that was finalised at the end of last year will allow 100% of Indian exports into Australia without tariffs or quotas within 6 years, and will allow 90% of Australian exports to India in without tariffs and quotas within 6 years. So The deal that's already been done, while it's expressed to be an interim agreement, is in fact a very, very good agreement. It's the best deal India's done with any major economy, and it's the first deal India's done with anyone in 10 years. So it's a good deal, and I would hate to think that people would hold back waiting for the icing to be put on the cake rather than making the most of the cake they've already got. Now, that said, you can always improve things. There's still 10% of Australian products that will be tariffed in 6 years' time. Obviously, there's a lot more that we might be able to do down the track in terms of further recognising Indian credentials and qualifications. There's a lot that we can do in terms of making sure our economies are digitally integrated.
Correct.
But nevertheless, it is much, much easier for Indians to do business in Australia and for Australians to do business in India now than it ever has been in the past.
Now, one area of cooperation has been vis-a-vis mitigating climate change. India has, of course, set a target of 2070 for net zero carbon emissions. Australia has a similar goal. How do you see cooperation between India and Australia on climate change, particularly some of the newer technology that folks are talking about, like green hydrogen? How feasible do you think it is?
Look, green hydrogen is the holy grail. Because if we are able to use wind and solar power to economically create green hydrogen, it would certainly turn intermittent power into reliable power. But I think there's a long way to go before that technology is proven at scale. In the medium term, I think that it's wonderful that clean Australian coal is now entering India tariff-free, including coal from the Adani mine in central Queensland. I think that it's good that Australian scientists and technicians are working together to try to ensure that we do improve our green technologies. But the important thing in the end is not just to get emissions down, it's to keep the lights on in countries like Australia and to get the lights on in countries like India. And that's why I think the Adani mine was so important and why I backed it so strongly, because there are still tens of millions of people in India that lack access to 24/7 power, and this is helping to give it to them. Now, things have improved immensely over the last decade or so, thanks to the Modi government.
Yeah.
But India is going to need Australian coal, Australian gas, for quite some time. The world is going to need fossil fuels for quite some time. And yes, by all means, let's get emissions down as far and as fast as we can. But let's not do it in ways that really damage people's standard of living, particularly in countries like India that still have hundreds of millions of people not really living the kind of prosperous, secure existence that we'd like them to have.
It's going to be a busy week for diplomacy between Canberra and Delhi. This week, the new Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, is going to be here in India. He's going to be in Delhi as well as in Ahmedabad. Australia and India are both members of the Quad. How do you see this grouping shaping up so far, including the Quad foreign ministers meeting that we had last week?
I think that relations between Australia and India have never been stronger. The fact that we have done the trade deal is great. The fact that we are both part of the Quad is great. The fact that we've had a cavalcade of Australian ministers come to Delhi over the last little while, the Education Minister, the Trade Minister, the Foreign Minister, the Resources Minister, and now the Prime Minister, that's great. I think it's fantastic that Narendra Modi is going to be in Australia for the Quad meeting later in the year. And I think that Narendra Modi is playing a remarkable part on the world stage, and this is only going to increase thanks to the G20. When you look at the Quad, the most significant geopolitical development since NATO, the architects of the Quad were Shinzo Abe from Japan and Narendra Modi from India. Without Abe's initiation and without Modi's generous response, I don't think the Quad would have happened. I don't think it was something that a US president could have done. Certainly it's not something that an Australian Prime Minister could have done. But between them, Abe and Modi did it. And yes, I suppose Xi Jinping had a hand in it by being so belligerent. But nevertheless, Modi is a very, very consequential world statesman thanks to his work with the Quad.
So the Quad foreign ministers, like I said, met on the sidelines of the G20 here in Delhi last week. They once again reiterated they're not a military grouping. They're not meant to counter any one country, leave alone China. Can there be a bigger threat than China? Quad now increasingly seems to be diversifying into all kinds of things, from climate change to student scholarships and science and technology partnerships. Does that not dilute the very purpose that these four countries came together for, which was to take on the Chinese threat on the high seas, whether it is these territorial disputes in the South and East China Seas, or just ensuring that there are free and open trading lanes on the high seas?
Well, that's a very fair question. I guess the four countries in question are serious strategic actors. The United States is the world's #1 democratic superpower. India is the world's #2 democratic superpower. Japan is an economic powerhouse and increasingly a military one as well. And Australia is a very significant part of the Indo-Pacific as well. So what you've got is the four big democracies of the Indo-Pacific working together to try to ensure that democracy can flourish and a rules-based global order can survive under the various challenges. Now, sure, there are all sorts of other things that can be done. The recent Quad meeting talked a bit about terrorism and what we could do to help in that area, help each other in that area. Great, but in the end, this is about the great Indo-Pacific democracies saying to anyone who would challenge the rules-based global order, don't. And we obviously know that Beijing is casting covetous eyes towards Taiwan, that Beijing would take Taiwan by force if it could. We've got to say to Beijing, look, don't. And the Quad raises doubts in Beijing's mind about just who it would be up against if it were to embark on this shocking act of adventurism. And let's be very clear, any attack on Taiwan would be several orders of magnitude more disruptive to the entire world than Putin's horrific attack on Ukraine.
You talked about the attack on Ukraine, and that's one issue that has now deeply divided the world between the West and the East, the North and the South. We saw just this past week how this issue was the singular stumbling block in the G20 countries not being able to adopt a joint communique. Are we increasingly seeing a world in which the United States and its European partners, other allies, are in the one corner, firmly backing Ukraine? And then you have Russia and China, two big powers, in the other corner. And countries that are seemingly neutral are stuck between these two sort of alliances, or between a rock and a hard place, if you will.
We all very much hoped after the fall of the Berlin Wall back in 1989 that we were entering a sunlit upland of peace and freedom based on an all but universal acceptance of liberal democracy and market capitalism. What we underestimated was the fact that Russia and China are aggressive revisionist powers. They have been nursing resentments and brooding, and at least in China's case, they've been building up their strength. I mean, the military build-up of China over the last couple of decades is the fastest and largest in peacetime history. So I guess the Ukraine war is a reminder that history didn't end in 1989, that war between nation states is still possible. In a sense, it's even more horrific than ever, as we are seeing, and it could get a lot worse in Ukraine if Putin escalates to de-escalate, as it were. And that means it's very, very important that we say to other potential aggressors, don't, because you won't win. The cost of you doing this is too high. I think there's no doubt that if Putin thought the attack on Ukraine would be as difficult as it turned out to be, that the Russian military would be as humiliated as they often have, he wouldn't have done it. If Ukraine had been a member of NATO, I don't believe this would have happened. It was only because Putin judged that Ukraine was largely friendless that he thought he could get away with his aggression, and I think it's critical that other potential aggressors do not get tempted by weakness.
So, in that context, do you believe that India, by virtue of being the host of the G20 this year, but also because it's one of the few countries which has good relations both with America and with Russia, do you think India will be able to play the role of a mediator in this conflict?
Well, India's a very substantial country, there's no doubt about that, and I thought it was very significant when Narendra Modi made a pretty clear point to Putin when they met last year that there was no place for war at this time. And it was also significant that the Quad foreign ministers did take a stand against Russia and its aggression in Ukraine, and that includes India's Jaishankar. So I think India is, in a non-provocative way, taking a appropriately strong position. I can understand that because of the history with the old Soviet Union and because of the fact that there are still a lot of armament in the Indian arsenal that's Soviet supplied or Russian supplied, that there are certain realpolitik factors at work here, just as Israel, as it happens, has not really condemned Putin's aggression because it needs to have a relationship with the Russians in Syria. So I think that we've got to be realistic and understanding that when it comes to the rhetoric, there's only so much that India can do. But I haven't met a single Indian of any substance who is not appalled by what's going on. And I think there's, as was shown in the Raisina dialogue just recently, when the Russian foreign minister made a typically blustering and mendacious speech, he was greeted with universal and obvious derision by the audience.
Last couple of questions. There have been a slew of incidents recently in Australia of Hindu temples being vandalized, graffiti being sprayed on their walls and so on. And the Australian government has not been seen, at least, as taking swift action. What will you say, Prime Minister, to assuage concerns here that some folks in India may have on these incidents?
I haven't been briefed on these particular issues. I can certainly understand why India would be anxious about any Australian-sourced agitation, separatist agitation. My understanding is that the recent protest in Melbourne was not nearly as big as it was reported to have been, and it was basically initiated by people who had come into Australia on tourist visas, pretending to want a holiday, but in fact dead set on agitation. Now, we do have ways of trying to ensure that that doesn't happen in the future. It's not for me to speak on behalf of the current government, but I'd be amazed if, knowing India's understandable concerns, we did red flag these activists from overseas and made sure that if they came into the country, it wasn't for the purpose of anti-Indian agitation.
All right, and I'll have to round off with a question on cricket, not least because of the ongoing India-Australia series, which seems to be nicely poised at 2-1. Would you wager a bet on who would win the Border Gavaskar Trophy?
I think, like all Australians, I enjoyed the third test better than the first and the second, and let's hope both the Prime Minister and Prime Ministers Modi and Albanese have something to cheer in the fourth test, and I'm sure whichever way it goes, cricket will be the winner.
All right. Thank you very much, Tony Abbott, former Prime Minister of Australia. Thank you very much indeed for your insights, your perspective into some of the pressing global issues right now, and of course, where the current state of relationship is between Canberra and Delhi, and of course, rounding off with his thoughts on the ongoing cricket series. That's a wrap. Thanks very much for tuning in. Good night.
Not be overthrown, because Indians are inherently democratic. There was one attempt in 1975 when the emergency was imposed, but people of India resisted fiercely. And rule of law, the constitutional law prevailed again. Our government has tried from the day one to ensure that all those unreached people are reached. All those left out people are connected. Every part of our country, every citizen is a beneficiary of every welfare step taken by the government of India.
देश होली का त्योहार मना रहा है। राहुल गांधी जी विदेश यात्रा पर हैं। कोई त्योहार हो तो देश में नहीं विदेश में पाए जाते हैं, और विदेशी दोस्त हों, विदेशी एजेंसियां हो या विदेशी जमी हो, देश पर प्रहार करने से कहीं बाज नहीं आते। ये अपने आप में दिखाता है कि वो भारत को बदनाम करने में कहीं पीछे नहीं रह रहे। भ्रम फैलाना, झूठ बोलना, देश के बारे में देखिए आज दुनिया क्या कहती है। यहाँ पे इटली की प्रधानमंत्री आई तो उन्होंने आके कहा मोदी जी की विश्वसनीयता, उनकी लोकप्रियता दुनिया भर में बढ़ रही है, उनकी मांग बढ़ रही है। मोदी जी मेजर लीडर के रूप में दुनिया ने स्वीकारा है।
We're crossing over to CNN News 18's Pallavi Ghosh, who's our senior editor. Pallavi, can you take us through the war of words that's erupting yet again over Rahul's comments made in the United Kingdom?
So as far as Rahul Gandhi goes, and the Congress party is but naturally defending him, saying that what's wrong in what he's saying, because he's essentially showing the mirror and something which the world is very much aware of. So to sum up, in the last 3 to 4 lectures that he's already given, whether it's a university press conference addressing the Indian diaspora or even the British Parliament, he certainly has said that the institutions in our country are crumbling, democracy has been compromised, and anyone who raises a point or asks a question of the government is targeted. Either their mics are switched off, they're not allowed to speak inside Parliament, or there are cases which are applied against them. He gave he gave an instance of himself also.
Hello, namaskar. This is First Post, and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. It's an action-packed Tuesday. We're starting with the story of drones. They're everywhere in the war in Ukraine. Russia has a new weapon in its arsenal. It's called the boomerang drone. And Moscow is presenting it as a game changer. The Ukrainians too are looking at drones to change the tide of this conflict, and they want cluster bombs from the Americans. We'll talk about what is being used and why these new age weapons are being used in this war. Also why the rest of the world is looking to replenish its drone supplies.